to Eric's podcast. Dive into conversations about life, family, and business with your host, Eric. Whether you're looking for practical advice, personal stories, or just a little inspiration, Eric's got you covered. Tune in every week to join the journey and get ready to elevate your game. Now, here's your host, Eric.
Okay. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of the Eric's Podcast. I'm your host, Eric, and today I am blessed to be with Linsey Knerl, who has been homeschooling her 6 kids since 2004, and she's a freelance writing. She does freelance and has a career in helping families with homeschooling. And thank you so much for joining us, Linsey. Good to see you.
Good to be here.
What have you been up to this week? Anything fun? Anything like exciting to announce?
Yeah, so we're starting gardening in Nebraska by starting little seeds inside the house. So my whole living room looks like a grow operation for little cabbages and Brussels sprouts. So that's what's going on in my world right now.
How old? You have 6 kids. How old are your kids?
My oldest is 20, and we go all the way down to 11 years old. So I have 4 at home right now.
How has that been with that whole having that many kids in the house? And then I'm guessing slowly some are like, starting to do their own thing and branch out and that kind of stuff. How's that transition been for you?
It's lovely and it's hard at the same time. What's great is that I'm always really sad when my kids leave, because by the time they hit young adult, they're just really cool people. We spend a lot of time together and we hang out, we play games, we talk a lot about life. And so it's like their best age, I think. And then they leave, which is very sad. But the good part is my kids are all very close as siblings. And so they're gaming online together and they're sending each other birthday gifts and they're checking in almost daily with one another, which is just what you dream of as a parent, right?
Yeah, 100%. I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. I was homeschooled myself. I went to public school between, first grade to 4th grade, which was a very interesting experience. And then in my transitioning out of that into a homeschooling environment again, it was very different from like really early on, the preschool era and that kind of thing. And then transitioning from public school back to homeschool, but it's a whole different, it's like that teenage type of environment, which at least for me, even with the co-ops and everything, I found the social element still very challenging. So how did you guys address that? I mean, and I have 6 siblings too. 1 older brother and 5. 1 older brother and 4 younger brothers and sisters. And so, yeah, we are very tight, and we kind of had to lean on each other a lot, just because of some family things and stuff that happened early on. But yeah, how did you solve that social element?
Yeah. So, each child is different. Some of them just like crave that next interaction with their peers. Some are perfectly cool to just sit at home and like build something with their 3D printer or like watch movies and hang out, like at home. But we do try to like kind of figure out what their interests and giftings are around 10, 11, and try to find like clubs or groups that they can be part of that are very, I guess, mastery oriented. So whether it's like learning an instrument or being in a choir or speech and debate or athletics, something where they're continually putting inputs into something so they can see outputs, but they're doing it alongside their peers. So that way it's not just, we're getting together for an hour and we're going to learn about science. And then when that lesson's over, it doesn't carry over into anything else, which is fine. And I'm nothing against co-ops, but there's something about being part of a team or being part of a group where you're kind of pushing each other to excel and get better that I feel like really has some good value, especially in the teenage years. And then you'll see them texting, or like maybe they'll be on a Discord chatting, and they're talking about stuff happening in their lives too. So it's just kind of a really great way to build a positive peer pressure group, I guess. And we have so many more options than probably when you were growing up, which also makes it a lot easier for parents to kind of figure it out.
That's very true. Because obviously I didn't have Discord or any of these other channels. And another thing too is I know my parents probably would not have allowed us to do Discord, like to do anything that they couldn't monitor. I know for me, going back to those groups and like a team thing, for me, it was dance, actually. I got into ballet, and that was craziest. I felt like the Lord told me to do it, so I did it. And at the time I was 16, which is old. It's old to get into dance. That's considered very late. And it's not impossible, it just is. But yeah, that really gave me, going back to that team kind of building thing, that gave me a lot of confidence. It completely transformed my entire, that being very shy and afraid and not wanting to go and talk to people and that kind of thing. That completely opened and changed my entire outlook on everything, because you kind of have to put yourself out there if you're going to go on stage and, wear these interesting outfits and that kind of stuff. But yeah, how did, in terms of like homeschooling in general, how did you come around it? Like, how did you guys decide that you wanted to do homeschooling versus the either a private school or public? Obviously, public school has a lot of stuff. I'm not up to date on what it is now, but I have heard a lot of bad things about it, regard like concerns and stuff around it. I know when I went, it was honestly, I didn't think it was that bad but I went up to fourth grade. I don't know what is after that. And I did one with fourth grade. There was a shift in terms of the way people were interacting and the cliques that started to be forming, and then we exited. So how did you guys choose homeschooling versus a traditional route?
Well, when we first started the first year, we were moving. We were in the middle of a move, and I just didn't love the idea of getting our child in a school just to be there for a year and then moving. And especially in kindergarten, when I feel like, I don't know, we were doing a lot of stuff at home, reading books and learning letters. And so it just kind of felt like, why disrupt at kind of an age where they're learning to like depend on someone else other than mom and dad? And so we just said, let's homeschool for a year. And at the time, it was like workbooks from the dollar store and reading and just like,
Sure.
play-based learning. And I just saw such growth personally and emotionally. And I felt like, I like this. Maybe we'll try it another year. And then I was having more children, and I was really enjoying my oldest kind of being involved in that and getting to see like the babies being born and what all goes on with that. And it just felt like very full and very complete as far as education went. And we just kind of said, let's just take this year by year. And then 20 years later, we're still doing it because it still works, but it's changed. And I think that, people that feel like they need to pull their kids out of public school for whatever reason, that's valid, whether it's bullying or maybe the child has special needs that aren't quite being met. But you can only rely on the anti or the counter to something for so long, because when things get really hard and you're like, I don't know if I can do this, I'm tired, I got work to do, you can't just go, but the bullying. You have to be like, this is working for us on a whole nother level. And I kind of think of it more as like life engineering versus public school is bad. It's like, we like to travel. We want the flexibility to sit with grandma while she's in hospice and spend those last moments with her and not have to answer to the school. My kids already missed 20 days and now they're potentially not going to graduate on time. There's just not a lot of flexibility built into the public school system, and compulsory attendance is the law. So if you're not sending your child to school, you're breaking the law. And that just didn't appeal to me. Like, I had a bigger idea of what education could be. And the public school model didn't offer the opportunity in that, basically.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know for us, we put our 3-year-old in a private school, farm school is where they basically do most of their schooling outside. And on the outside, it looks really great. It looks like, because we live in an apartment and we don't have a yard, we don't have that kind of thing. And plus he would be outside all day. He would be playing with sticks and learning like 1+1 with the sticks and stuff like that, which sounds really great. So it's like all the stuff that we would actually do if we had a yard and we could be outside all the time. And the main issue that we found was, one, we both agreed that he's probably too young in terms of the environment and the kids, because he would come home with some traits and values and stuff that we completely don't agree with, like hitting and stuff like that, or arguing with you and not being respectful, that kind of thing. And at first we thought, okay, well, we can counteract this, because he's only going 2 days a week, and the rest of the time we can continue to instill our values and everything in him, and it'll counterbalance. Didn't work, because he's a sponge and he soaked it all in. So we ended up having to pull him out and going back to our kind of play learning, like you said, a routine, which has been really great. But what occurred to us was that he's too much influenced by the things around him right now, and that he doesn't have the core values that we want in place. So when they're challenged, just flips, because everybody wants to be accepted and you want to be accepted in the group. And so you're going to do what the group's doing. And so I guess my question would be, in terms of like rate, because when you're put in those environments, you're automatically challenged, right? And if you're never put in those environments, then you're not challenged in any way. So how do you, homeschooling with the community and all of that, obviously you're instilling your values in your kids, but how do you know that if they're challenged, they're instilled enough and know how to counter it?
Yeah, it is the like number one, I think, dilemma or challenge or opportunity, I guess, if you're a positive person with parenting in general. But I think it's more obvious that it's a challenge when they're home with you. Part of it is knowing your child, knowing are they more of a leader? Do they do things and everyone around them like will do it? Or are they more like, I'm going to hang back and wait to see and be cautious? You can kind of see that personality in them. And the other thing is just understanding that part of homeschooling, i.e. parenting, is giving your child plenty of safe failure opportunities where the consequences are minimal, but the learning outcomes are very big, so that when they learn things, they can apply them later to places where they're not
Do you
going
have
to
an
have that
example of one of
safety net.
those? Okay, sorry.
Yeah. So one of them is, we talked about Discord. I have some homeschool families that I'm lovely people that probably would not let their children be on Discord or TikTok or, even have cell phones that are unmonitored. And we have not been perfect in this. So we have had to have conversations, right? But I would rather those conversations be here at home with me. A lot of times they will come to me and they'll be like, hey, I don't really know how to get a handle on this, or what I'm seeing my friends do online or whatever. And I'm thinking, this is not a failure. This is a win, because they're coming to me. And it happened like while they're under my roof and they're safe and they're a minor, and it's not something where they're going to be dealing with getting kicked out of school or something like nothing that bad. But it's just like, we learn how to do it here now while you're under my roof and you have my protection as a parent, or you learn it later when you don't. Not learning is not an option. This is just the natural evolution of people growing up and having technology and having to deal with all different kinds of people. And I think taking a super protective approach where like, you're not going to have these things because they can be bad, can only work so long, because then when you kick them out of the house and they have no clue how to deal with it, it's like throwing a kid into the ocean with no swimming lessons and no life jacket. And it can be really, really bad for children. So we're working on it. And every day we kind of adjust our rules, and they'll be different for different children. And I like that there are a lot of tools out there. I don't trust monitoring tools 100%, because I like to share some fun little jokes that they're not bad, but they might get flagged because they say like the word kill in them or something. Like it doesn't have any nuance, right? So as somebody who kind of values nuance and education, I feel like we have to be able to make situational decisions. And a lot of the technology out there doesn't do that. So it is a very, very hard part of parenting. Homeschooling, even more of a focus. But I'm excited that we have a chance to go through those things with our kids still under our care, and we can get them ready. It's like teaching them to drive, right? You just little by little, you let them go. Technology is going to be the same way.
Yeah, I know. I was just reading something the other day of the rise of, on chatting apps like Telegram and other apps, where there's these groups that are targeting minors and basically holding them for ransom or something like that. And the rise of suicides and stuff have gone way up because of that. And it's mainly because, at least in what I was reading, the interviews of the parents, that the minors were so embarrassed that they didn't want to go to their parents. And so in your view, how do you give them freedom? This also kind of goes back to instilling the values of being able to come to you and feel comfortable coming to you, even when something so embarrassing has happened, how do you counteract, or how do you deal with that?
Yeah, so it's like twofold. And actually, I just reading same story about some young man who took his life, right? Because someone had convinced him that his parents wouldn't love him anymore and he had to pay $5,000. It
Disgusting.
was terrible crime. Part of us as parents need to really be aware. We can get really distracted with social media and looking at things and, who wore what to the Oscars and what's going on in politics. And we spend a lot of
Hmm.
time online, but I don't know that we're always seeking out the resources and seeking out the news that might actually affect our children. And that's harder news to get. You have to be a little more proactive. It's not just going to show up in your feed because it's not hitting
True,
the
true.
algorithm eyeballs, right? So part of that is because I work in technology and I work in education, I'm kind of getting all that news. And when I see something, I'm like, okay, we need to talk to my kids about this before
Mm.
it happens. And so we'll be in cars and driving on the way to like a tournament or something. And I'll be like, hey guys, here's this thing that's happening in the news. And it's really sad. And, I don't want you to be using technology in a way that hurts women or girls or other people, right? I don't want you to use it in a way that could possibly get you
Yeah,
put in jail, right? But also, if you were to mess up, we will
yeah.
figure it out. Like, there is nothing you can do that will make me not love you. Nothing, right? And I think that part of homeschooling, the thing I think that is so wonderful is they're seeing you every day mess up. There's no like, oh, I just got to get it together till my kids get to school. And then I just have a mental breakdown and then get it all together before they get home. There's none of that. There is watching mom cry when
Mm.
grandma dies. There's watching dad stress out when he loses his job. And then us coming together as a family and going, but you know what? We have each other. We will figure it out. And I think having that kind of attitude towards everything builds your children up in a way that honestly, I don't know if you can do it if they're in public school all day. And I think it like fortifies them and makes them stronger people so that when they do get out into that world and they're doing those not safe
Hmm.
failures, they can handle it. It's a perseverance that you can give them. You're uniquely positioned to do so. And I think you have a duty
I
to as a
agree.
parent.
So, okay, so how much do you, okay, homeschooling, how much does it cost usually? Because you have 6 kids. You said you kind of started out going buying dollar books for free learning and all that. How did you guys transition? Did you move to a curriculum? Did you create your own out of a bunch of different things? Like, what was your journey there?
Yeah. So, our seasons change. When I was just a stay-at-home mom and didn't work outside the home at all, I had more time to like stand there and, point to this chalkboard that we had in the dining room and kind of do that the way people imagine when they
Mm.
first think of homeschooling. Maybe the older generations kind of had done. Now, because my children have different interests and I want to like help them see how far they can take those interests, they're all going to do some different things. So, like my one child would take a live online art class from a very accomplished teacher. I have a student who's doing some college courses online, dual enrollment. I have a student who really just loves books. And so a lot of his learning is just him reading these books that go along with the curriculum that he's doing that are also in books. It's a combination of knowing what's worked well for our other children and keeping those pieces, and then also having some modules in there. Maybe 30% of their learning is very interest based, with an understanding that if I have a child that wants to get into a STEM career, yes, we're going to have to do more math and
Mm.
science than maybe my art student who will just have to have whatever the minimum state recommendation is, and that's fine.
So you don't have, oh yeah,
And
sorry.
spending varies, that's okay. Spending, we try to use things that can be reused from sibling to sibling, which is an advantage we have that other families might not have. And I tend to overspend just because I work full time and I need them to be able to be somewhat self sufficient with their learning and take some kind of ownership over that. It can be $600 to $1,000 per student per year, not including activities, which can be probably the most
That
expensive
makes
part of
sense.
it.
Yeah, but also activities could change. Do you have like a requirement? Because I talked to some I know some homeschool families, and I know I've talked to some too, where they have a requirement where it's like, okay, if take my dance, for example, if I chose dance, I would have to commit to doing it for a year versus I can't just, oh, yeah, I want to do dance and then drop out a month later and then be like, oh yeah, I want to go over here and do this and drop out again. Have you had anything like that? Or have you like experimented with what works?
Yeah, well, I think you can't know if you truly hate it till you give it a try. And I'm someone who hated dance when I started at 5 or 6, and then I did it for 12 years and loved, like,
Mm.
dance was my life. So I'm glad my parents, at 4 years old, my
Yeah, that's
goodness, such a
small.
tiny
Yeah.
little human, and we're like, try it. The same way with piano, drums. I just was really into music and the arts. For my children, I tend to try to find things that they can do together to start, just because I am not Uber and I can't be driving like
Yeah.
all over, right? So speech and debate have been good for us because I think public speaking is a great tool for everyone to have. And so they all have to do a year. Same way with vocal. I feel like we have this great resource in our community, a partnership with the college, and their doctor of
Mm.
music gives these
Wow.
homeschool lessons very affordably. And I'm like, why would we not take advantage? So there are some things they all have to do for 1 year, but I know them kind
Sure.
of by being with them all day. And I wouldn't put them in something that I think would be like just a really poor fit beyond those things that we have all the kids take. And yeah, finish the year because we paid for it. And I think it sends a good message to their peers and their instructors and
Mm-hmm.
respect, right? It can be a little disrespectful to have a kid show up, the teacher puts all those inputs into them, and then they don't have anything to show for it when it comes time for the final performance. I think there's something to be said for finishing what you start, just as a
Mm-hmm.
person, not
Yeah,
necessarily a homeschooler.
100%. I mean, it shows, it also adds a level of thought behind your action. Um, that's something that I know that I would want to instill into my kids in that same way, because I don't want you to be frivolous and, just going from here to here. And I want you to be able to think, okay, what's the consequences of this and my time and all of that. It's very important. Yeah. So going back to the curriculum, so do you use a curriculum now, or, okay, what curriculum do you use, or how did that evolve?
Yeah. So a mixture. Yeah. So, we've tried a lot of things that did not work. And I think
Everybody's
that's
story. Yeah.
pretty common. Yeah. Because you have the flexibility, you can sometimes be maybe all too eager to abandon something because it's not working. And that could be, maybe something's not working with your child. It may not be the curriculum. But I also think we have shiny
Oh
object
yeah, that's
syndrome
true.
as homeschoolers. Like there's just too
Yeah.
many cool things. We spent a few years where I was like reviewing products from homeschool companies, and I was all too like excited to try this thing. And then I realized, but every time I do this, I'm asking my child to like switch
Hmm.
their brain and how they approach, and it's not fair to them, right? So I eventually stopped doing that. And we picked a few things that really worked well. Like we used demo learning for math because the math you see works really well for my right brain and left brain learners. My child with dyslexia and dysgraphia can use it as well as my child that doesn't. So there's some staples like that where we just continually use them year after year with each of the children. And then we might have to just, because of the learning differences, say, this language arts program isn't working for my one child. He's going to use one curriculum and then this other child's going to use a different curriculum. But we do usually buy things from publishers or online school providers. And we just kind of fit them in where they work with the child's abilities and our budget and schedule. And I can't say enough about if you're a savvy shopper and you're doing Black Friday sales and all that stuff, like it's a great time to buy
Mm.
curriculum too. I get a lot of great deals, buy one, get one for online courses from some of the places we shop from.
Wow.
Black Friday, like coupon codes, like you can really, because they're fighting for your
That's true.
business and the market is getting really very full. And it's no longer like this is the standard homeschool book that you buy. There's thousands of options. And so these companies really have to work
With
hard to
there
get your
being so many
business.
options now, how do you go about picking out, how do you know it's going to be a good fit? How do you know it's going to work when there's so many out there to choose? Is there like a survey,
Yeah.
or is there something you could take that's like, this is your personality homeschool curriculum type thing, you know?
Yeah, it's funny because I have seen some sites like that are trying to do that. I think that the interesting thing is it's kind of like if you're looking for a movie and your history says or Netflix says, hey, you like these 7 shows, so you're probably going to like this movie, and then you watch it and you're like, you couldn't have been any
Yeah.
more incorrect. Some of those things can't really be quantified. So where I would start is finding other parents
Mm.
that share both values, because that's a big one, but also learning approaches. I don't particularly care for curriculum that makes my children memorize a bunch of arbitrary
Yeah.
things that's not connected to like a
That's kind of what we
larger
started
picture
with,
of history
honestly.
or a larger, yeah. And yet there's some people that love that. And so when I'm seeking things out, I always say, well, what do you like about it? And if they tell me, oh, it's all the memorization, I go, well, that's not going to work for my family. So asking those kinds of questions from people that share your same values. What do you like about it? What do you not? It narrows the field down significantly. And not being afraid to get away from those legacy publishers and legacy curriculum providers, because, and nothing against it. We use a few of them, but they've kind of gotten comfortable in the fact that they were first to market. And so they're always going to be a top option. But as these new products kind of roll out and parents start to find things that work better, it's going to be on them to adapt and continually promote what it is that makes them unique. Be updating their technology and updating their websites and making sure that they have fast shipping and discount pricing or whatever it is. Just don't let a company or curriculum publisher take your business for granted, I guess, because your child is very important and their learning is why you're doing this. I guess just because that's always been the option doesn't mean you have to
That's
continue
true.
down that
How
path.
do you, as a parent, when it comes to the curriculum and schooling and all of that, how do you instill how do you instill that creative challenge? Because I know, at least with my siblings and myself looking back, it was fun when it wasn't really challenging, but as soon as it got challenging, it wasn't fun anymore and they didn't want to do it. How as a parent do you instill like that you can do it, keep going, like, because now I love a challenge, I love a mystery, I love when I can't figure it out, and that's more enticing to me because of the accomplishment of figuring it out versus everything's easy. How do you instill that into your kids?
Yeah. So it's kind of how do you get them to
Yeah,
eat their
exactly.
vegetables thing, right? Same kind of approach. Take 3 bites and then you'll get, or in my family, if we have a veggie eater that's not a fan, we'll go eat your veggies first, get it out of the way,
Yeah.
right? We kind of take that same approach. And I sit here and I tell you this as someone who is not as consistent as I would like to be. Like, I don't use planners. I have this Todoist app on my phone and I throw everything in there. And then I check, like 30, 40, 50 tasks, everything from like take my vitamins to feed the dog. That's like in that app. And I just check. That's how I stay consistent. So for my children, I've kind of, created something similar where these are the 4 subjects or 3 subjects if they're, large or college level that you're going to do today. When and how you do them is completely up to you, but they will be done because that's how you're going to get your video games. And my kids love
Sure.
video games. So it just
How
kind
do
of
you, that's
happens.
at least that's a good question too. How do you because different ages, different types of structures and different freedoms within that. Before your youngest, you said that 11, I think. Um, yeah, okay.
Yeah, he's 11.
How's the structure for his schooling different from, let's say, one of your teens? Can you go
Mhm.
into how, like, because obviously I'm a parent, I have a 3-year-old, so I'm a little bit, you know, I'm not there yet, but I'm sure there's listeners here that who might be curious in wanting to get into this, but maybe they have a 11-year-old and let's say a 13-year-old or a 16-year-old. How's that structure different, and how do you go about that during the day? Like, do you give them, because I know, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's it's interesting because I can say from this time to this time we're going to do this, or this time to this time, but that's never how it works, because like
Things
the
happen,
dog
sure.
throws up on the carpet, or there's like something, right? Because it's not a controlled institutional environment, which means you will have more distractions. And part of learning is figuring out how do we deal with the things as they happen and then get quickly back on track. I tend to, everyone does math every day. That's it. Because as homeschoolers, we fall, I will just say this, homeschool children, while they can score very well on tests and do very, very well in school, overall tend to not have the highest priority
Hmm.
on math. And I don't know if that's our confidence speaking or our kids just hate it. And so we kind of like let it slide. For me, it's a little bit of both. But I know that's something we have not always been great with, and I'm trying to refine as we go. So math first. That's the first thing we do. Everyone does it. I mean, you should have math at every age. And so everyone sits and works on their math at the same time. And I've got one on the couch and one on the dining room table and one laying on the floor. And one's got a cat in its lap, at his lap at the computer. And everyone's just working on math. And I'm usually sitting at the table then going through emails or paying bills or something where I'm working, but I still have my ears to like
Yeah.
problems. And usually what happens is a kid that just did that same math a year or two before ends up walking by and going, "Hey, buddy, you might want to look at that one again." They kind of do very well to mentor each other. But even if you don't have that, just knowing math is a thing that's going to take a lot of focus and attention. So maybe I shouldn't be cooking dinner or doing something very focus intense. And that's really just kind of how we do it. Our structure is, if it needs a lot of my focus, if it's very intense, if it's a tears situation or a subject where they're just like, I need to be there and I need to
Mm.
be present. And if it's like reading, where it's like, hey, buddy, take your book that you can't put down because you love it so much into your room and read. Like, I don't need to be there for that. So it's figuring out intent and focus, what else needs to be done in the house. And we kind of schedule around that, which I know is not a schedule at all. And it makes some people
Mm.
very uncomfortable, but it's realistic about the demands of a family and the demands of life. So 3 to 4 subjects, setting it up so that everyone's energies are focused in the right place. Just kind of go throughout the day with life stuck in there. And at the end of the day, if you get all your chores done and you've helped clean up after dinner and your schoolwork's done, you can Minecraft for a couple hours. I don't care.
Do
That's
you
fine.
so it does sound like there is kind of a structure in terms of we're doing math, reading, science, history, and there's this structure throughout the day. Do you allow, I guess
Mhm.
my next question would be, because this is how I was homeschooled. We started out with the same similar structure where we'd wake up, we would do breakfast, whatever, and then we would immediately start with math, reading, science, and then we would end with history. Except the history is different now in the same curriculum, which makes no sense. But later on, during like teenage years, it got more to a place where it's like mom would say, okay, I need you to do this, 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 and this is what you need to do. I would set up my day to where I would do a week's worth of work. And so I wouldn't have to do any more the rest of the week. At least that's how it went in my mind. And that didn't fly very well with her. So I had to do it on the low. And do a little bit of extra and extra. But looking back on that, it's like, okay, I, I don't know. Would I do that now? Would I do that? Would I do that with my 3-year-old? I probably would allow him a certain extent of that, while at the same time probably giving him something more challenging to do. How does that kind of work with your family? Do you do something similar or?
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting too, because the beauty of homeschooling is the kids can somewhat go at their own level, learning differences. You can work through that dyslexia challenge, right? And you can get kids really confident with reading. But if you have a kid that, I have one right now, I'm laughing because it took the one child like 2 years to get through the curriculum, which is fine. It's not set up year by year. It's like subject or mastery based. But this kid's like 6 months and he's done because he loves it and he's just
Mm.
flying through it and he thinks it's great. And I'm kind of asking him, all right, you finished this in 6 months. We have some options. Do you want to take this time and like learn an instrument, or like maybe you pick a subject that you learn about, or we find like an online college course that you find is interesting. You can knock out some credits. Like, what do you want to do? I feel like there's a way to be like, oh, well, we don't want to waste. You moved ahead in something very quickly, which is cool because that doesn't always happen. And maybe it's going to take you longer to do something else. And so it all evens out. But also, we don't want to waste that time. So I kind of feel like if you've earned yourself some extra time, you tell me, what do you want to learn? And I think phrasing it like that and approaching it like that, it's not a punishment then for finishing early. It's more like, oh, we got our vegetables out of the way. Like, what kind of dessert can we have? And I'm finding they're like, oh, I want to learn 3D printing, or I want to take some online CAD classes, or I have one kid that's like learning Russian. I do not even know if he's actually like picking anything up, but he's taking the classes because he likes Russian composers and he thought it would be interesting, right? And he can do that. And I don't feel like it's wasted time because it could be something that pushes him towards something else.
That makes sense.
Does that make sense?
I can remember my motivation was I wanted to play a video game back then, and that was going to be my reward because I learned early on that I'm much motivated. I'm motivated more if I have some reward that I need to clear this out of the way, and then I can go do that thing. Do you use a reward-like system for motivation? How do you do motivation?
Yeah, so I started out like a lot of parents, I think, with like charts and stickers and all that. I found out very quickly that's like a full-time job
Yes, it
when
is.
you have a family. And I would like after a week be like, forget about it. And then half the kids would forget about it. And then the one kid that was really like, this isn't fair, so it didn't work for us. But I do kind of have this basic after 6, and I like have this checklist in the living room that's like, want to play video games? And then there's like 6 questions to ask. And it's like, are all the animals fed? Are the dishes and the laundry picked up in your room? Just like some little like end of the day wrap up things. And then one of the questions is, have you asked mom if she needs help with anything? Have you asked dad if he needs help with anything? Now me, I'm going to be like, well, I don't know, switch over the laundry. Dad might be like, help me build this shelf. So the kids are just like, oh, I don't know if I want to ask dad. But what it does is it reminds them to check in with their parents who probably could use some help. It helps them to think a little bit outside of themselves. And then that's it. And then they can play video games. And honestly, if it happens at 6 or 8 or 9, could that mean they're playing video games for 3 hours? Potentially. But usually they're playing together again or with a sibling that's away at college, or like that's their social. I know video games for kids today, like that's their pure time. That's me laying on the couch with the corded phone wrapped around my finger, talking to my friend for 3 hours, right? That's what this is. So parents need to remember it's not just this bad technology. It's peer groups. So I'm okay with that as long as they like hit the other markers, they get to bed on time, and we don't see like behavior issues.
100%. Okay, so if someone in the audience want to get started with homeschooling, they want to venture into it. In your opinion, what's the best way of kind of like, obviously listening to this has been really helpful, but going back to choosing a curriculum, all this, because I could imagine it being daunting to some brand new person in terms of structuring the day and it being kind of overwhelming of, I need to make sure this, it's all done, that kind of thing. What would you tell that person in terms of getting like, it's not as bad as you think, or it's not as hard as you think, right?
Yeah. And I think so like the biggest danger and the biggest mistake that I see is something you're not even going to know you're making until you do it. And that is trying to make homeschool like regular school, but just at home. Right? So setting up your area to look just like a classroom and putting the posters and the charts, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the beauty of homeschool is it could be so much bigger than that, right? But you're not going to get there till you're kind of on the road. So what I always try to say is if you're pulling your kid out, have just one subject locked and loaded and ready to go. Start with one. Because the odds you're going to pick something or pick a few things and some of them won't work and it might be a little frustrating for you or frustrating for your child is very high. I like to pick math because you don't have a lot of those like moral values. For most things, math is math. And so just choosing the delivery method, whether you want it to be workbooks or online or how you want to do that. It takes away a lot of the like, oh, are they going to teach history from like a Eurocentric perspective, or are they, there's just like a lot of things to consider with the humanities that aren't going to be in math for the most part. So I tell people to pick a math curriculum, ask parents in their group who again share their values and share their perspective towards, do we love memorization? Are we more hands-on? Look at those reviews and get the math going. Start with just math for a
What if
week or
you
two.
don't consider yourself very good at math or history or science or whatever? Because I could see that being daunting very much also.
Yeah. So as a homeschooler today versus a homeschooler back then, you don't have to be their quote unquote teacher. I consider myself more an administrator, or if I'm honest, a curator of educational experiences, right? I don't love 18th century Russian literature, even though I do, as much as somebody who has a PhD in it. And I'm not going to pretend like I'm going to stand there and tell my kid anything mind-blowing. So I'm going to find a course written or published by someone who cares about that, or a teacher or a tutor or a community group, or somebody is the authority in that. That doesn't mean I can't teach things. And I think for like under 10, you can handle most everything, maybe up to 12. But I think with the older grades, to say, oh, I can't homeschool because I don't know calculus, join the club. I didn't take calculus, right? But we have dual enrollment, online college courses you can take for credit, and online curriculum providers. You've got Khan Academy that can help like tutor you as you go through. You've got apps now where you can ask Perplexity AI, I have this math problem and I see the answer. I don't know how you got there. Can you break it down and explain to me like I'm a 5-year-old? And AI will do that for you. So we have these tools that don't put all the burden on mom and dad.
Yeah, that's true. So, like we have Masterclass and other great tools like that. So I guess that was going to bring me to my last question, which was, do you utilize tutors? Because I know math for me was probably the worst subject in terms of getting it into my head. And we went through so many different curriculums, nothing would work. And finally, there was somebody, a retired rocket scientist in the community, and she offered to teach me. And she explained it in like the only person that could explain it to me in a way that my brain would be able to make it work. And that was the result. And that was me. That was me at 16. So I was very far behind, by the way. I probably still am, honestly, but but there's enough tools out there. We don't need to be as smart as we had to be back then. But yeah, did you ever?
And isn't that amazing though? I mean, think about that. If you were in the school system and you had a teacher, that's your math teacher. And if they don't explain it the way your brain works, oh well. If the biggest problem we have is we have to kind of seek out the things that might fit, but at least we can. I don't know if it's an actual problem so much as it's just like another responsibility, right?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. Like going back to the legacy homeschool curriculums, a lot of them were written, or at least the ones that we were trying, were very one-sided, going back to like that memorization type thing, very one-sided and one kind of type of person. And there were a couple, like two of my siblings loved it, and they got it, and they were able to excel in it. But then the more creative siblings, like myself, couldn't understand it at all. We needed something else to make it work. And we found some solutions, but yeah, having to hire a tutor for math I was the only one who needed that. But yeah, it is amazing how now we have technology, we have AI. Although I am a bit hesitant to allow my kids to use AI, just because I know for myself, because I use it a lot. I know that I don't know how it got to that answer. And I just have to trust that the answer is what the answer is. Whereas when you do a math problem, or you're writing a book, or you're doing something, you know how you came to that conclusion, and you can talk about it and back it up.
Right.
And if AI is going to be the dominant thing, well, I feel like society is going to get just they're not going to know how to do anything. We're going to be even more reliant on that. And I don't want my kids to be that way.
Yeah, and actually, one of the things I like about Perplexity is like it will link to the source, and it's a Khan
Oh, okay.
Academy video. So then my kids can go, oh, here's the video that explains the concept, right? It directs them. So yeah, not all A is created equal. And I totally agree with you. Like explainability and figuring out how you came up with it is going to be key. But there's a lot of different tools too. And, I think kids are going to come up in a place where AI is going to be
Yeah. It
everywhere.
almost already
So that's
is.
another thing, kind of like with the cell phones or the Discord, like teaching them responsible use of AI is going to probably be something. Is it the alpha? Is that what the youngest
I have
generation
no idea.
alpha? They're going to, yeah, I think it's alphas. The little baby alphas are going to be around AI. And so as homeschoolers, if you're like a parent that it's like, I don't want anything to do with this, part of equipping your little baby alphas for the job or the career of the future is to like, how do we responsibly use AI? So just another thing to add to
Yeah.
parents' list of things to
I
have to
know
think about.
this, especially when it comes to education and, um, I mean, technology in general. We were just thinking about this the other day that, our 3-year-old will not know a world without an iPad. I know how I grew up. We were outside. We had to use our imagination. We had to do all a bunch of stuff to keep ourselves entertained. Whereas now you have video games and you have shows, and they have all this stuff that don't necessarily need imagination for. And that's one of the things I know for our 3-year-old in terms of screen time. We use this app called Puck Puck. It's an educational app, and it's incredible because it has like blocks and stuff. It's very low on in terms of sensitivity and stuff like that. And we play together with that, and it's great. But yeah, that's something that is completely, as going back to the AI thing. I think parents need to be aware, or at least, yeah, more aware about what technology is actually doing to your child's brain and the development of it, because you don't want them to be able to not know how to navigate the world without the iPad to answer all the questions.
I agree. And, it's like we get hung up on things like, I don't know calculus, so I can't teach my student, when really technology and some of these things are going to be larger, sociological challenges. And yet we have parents that will not try an
Yeah,
app or
you have the
try,
opposite
the
kind of
thing is the
happening
best
too.
way to understand. Yeah. So the best way to understand what a technology does and how it works and how it might create problems for your child is to like get on
Yeah,
it and try it. And it's been eye-opening for me to like see what maybe the things on social media are saying these apps are doing, and really what they're doing. Some of the dangers are widely over exaggerated, and then some of the things that might be a challenge aren't being addressed at all. And so I think that you have to, if you're going to be homeschooling and you're the source of information, get out there and try some of these things, just so you have some
yeah,
authority in
and
it.
definitely probably be good to introduce them in a control, going back to that controlled environment, introduce them in a controlled
Mhm.
environment. Because if you would be like, for me as a kid, I couldn't, when Facebook had just come out, that I wasn't allowed to sign up for Facebook. Well, I went around them and signed up anyway. And I had a Facebook account
Of
for two
course you did.
years and they didn't even know. And then they finally was like, you can have a Facebook account. I'm like, okay, I already have one. Whereas if it had been more of another thing too, I think is the reason why. I think that's very important as a parent to say why. If they had been like,
Mhm.
okay, we don't want you having a Facebook account because it could really harm you and hurt you, and you could be taken advantage of as a 13-year-old or 12-year-old, yeah, 13, as a 13-year-old, like this is the kind of stuff that happens on these kind of sites. If they had explained that to me, I probably wouldn't have gone behind their backs. And I think that's something that as parents, we have to, because, we're moving throughout the day. We have a ton of stuff on our minds all the time. And sometimes just saying, no, you're not, I don't want you doing that, or no, you can't do that, or stop that, or whatever. But without taking the time of giving explanations, I feel like in a lot of ways you're missing an opportunity to teach them something and for them to grow, and they're going to wonder why. And I think,
Yeah, and at the biggest mantra of homeschoolers is to what? Prioritize and value curiosity, right? So if we really want to plug into what makes children so amazing is that their need to know things and learn things and be curious. And we want to encourage that in homeschooling. And we want to encourage them to try all these things, but yet now we're not willing to like give them the, that's kind of anti what we say when we talk about these other uses of learning and curiosity. So being consistent is important. So for kids to even respect what you have to say, I think.
Well, Linsey, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. This has been great. What are some resources or a website or something that people could get in touch with you if they have any other questions or anything like that? How can we reach you?
Yeah, so I'm on most social as L, my first initial, Knerl, Knerl. And I have a website, linseyknerl.com, and you can reach out to me there. And then for anyone that's just like, I want to start homeschooling Monday, what do I need to do? My book, Homeschool Hacks, How to Give Your Kid a Great Education Without Losing Your Job or Your Mind, is full of tips. And I've interviewed families that work from home or in the military, all different situations. So maybe you could get some ideas from parents who've made it work and see if you can't incorporate some of those into your own life.
Thank you, Linsey, so much. I hope you have a great rest of your day and week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome to Eric's podcast. Dive into conversations about life, family, and business with your host, Eric. Whether you're looking for practical advice, personal stories, or just a little inspiration, Eric's got you covered. Tune in every week to join the journey and get ready to